Picture this, it's 1958. The biggest star on the planet, Elvis Presley, trades his blue suede shoes for a pair of army boots. I mean, can you even imagine? This one move, it changed everything. So that's what we're digging into. How did 2 years in the US Army completely transform not just the man, but the king of rock and roll himself?
You've probably heard this famous line from John Lennon, right? It pretty much sums up what a lot of people think. The idea that the raw, rebellious, world-shaking rocker just got swallowed up by the military machine, gone forever. For so many, this was the beginning of the end for the real Elvis.
But what if that's totally wrong? What if the Army didn't kill his career at all? What if, and stick with me here, it was the single smartest, most strategic move he ever made? Yeah, that's the other side of the story, and that's what we're going to get into. Okay, so to really get this, we have to rewind. It's the late 1950s, and Elvis, he's not just a star, he's a phenomenon. Parents are outraged, teens are obsessed, he's a cultural force of nature. And then, bam, right at the absolute peak of all that chaos, a draft notice shows up.
And you gotta understand, this wasn't really a choice for him. There was this law, the Universal Military Training and Service Act. Basically, if you were a guy between 18 and 26, you had to register for the draft. This was America's first peacetime draft, so this was hanging over the heads of every young man at the time, even the king of rock and roll.
And this wasn't something that just popped up out of nowhere. I mean, look at this timeline. He registered way back in '53, right after he turned 18. By early '57, he's classified 1A, which means he could be called up any minute. So for almost a full year, while he's cranking out #1 hits, this draft is just looming over him. He even had to get a 60-day delay just to finish filming King Creole. The pressure must have been intense.
Okay, so this leads us to one of the biggest myths, right? The idea that his manager, the infamous Colonel Tom Parker, is the guy who sent Elvis to the Army. A lot of fans thought, come on, Parker could have pulled some strings, gotten him out of it. But really? Could one guy, even the colonel, outsmart the entire US military? Well, the truth is way more calculated. Parker was smart. He knew there was no getting out of it. So what did he do? He leaned in. He turned a mandatory service into a PR masterstroke. He could have gotten Elvis into special services, entertaining the troops, the easy celebrity route, but he said no. He talked Elvis into serving as a regular GI, just like any other guy. The goal? It was genius. Take this controversial, hip-shaking rebel and turn him into an all-American hero. But that was all the public stuff, the image. Behind the scenes, the man inside that uniform was going through, well, a lot. While the colonel was playing chess with the media, Elvis was fighting his own private war. And those 2 years, they were filled with incredible loss and life-changing moments that would stick with him forever.
Just a few months in, he's stationed at Fort Hood in Texas, and he gets the worst news imaginable. His mom, Gladys, who he was incredibly close to, she died, just like that, of a heart attack. He had to get emergency leave just to go home for her funeral.
And you can't overstate how huge this was for him. He called it the great tragedy of his life. Gladys was his rock, the most important person in his world, and losing her left this hole that, according to his friends, just never really filled. Suddenly, the biggest star in the world is just a heartbroken son, a world away from everything he knows.
Then, in Germany, something else happened. Something that would cast a long shadow. He was trying to keep up with the grueling training, and a sergeant introduced him to amphetamines to stay awake and have energy. And Elvis, he bought into it, big time. He thought they were amazing. This was the very beginning of a dependence on prescription drugs that would haunt him for the rest of his life. But it wasn't all dark. Germany is also where another huge piece of his life fell into place. He's at a party at his house off base, and he meets this girl. She's just 14 years old, the stepdaughter of an Air Force officer. Her name? Priscilla Beaulieu. And yeah, she would eventually become his wife. So you've got Elvis in Germany, dealing with grief, a new love, and a new drug habit. So what's happening back home? Well, Colonel Parker isn't just sitting around. He's running his own master plan, which you could call the business of absence. He was making sure the Elvis empire didn't just survive, it thrived. Now, Colonel Parker usually gets painted as the bad guy in this story, right? The greedy, cigar-chomping manager who just bled his client dry. But the truth, well, it's a little more complicated than that. Yeah, he was a tough negotiator, no doubt about it. But people who actually worked with him, they said he was a man of his word, incredibly reliable. He'd even pay musicians their full fee for shows that got canceled without them even asking. I mean, who does that? That was practically unheard of back then.
And that brings us to the biggest myth of them all, the one you always hear. Did he really take half of every single dollar Elvis made?
Let's actually break this down. The whole 50% thing is kind of true, but not really. For his main gigs, records, movies, concerts, Parker took 25%. And honestly, for a manager working exclusively with one client of that magnitude, that was pretty standard. The 50% cut, that only came in on joint business ventures where there were actual partners, which, again, was a totally normal way to split things.
All right, so 2 years are up, Elvis comes home a sergeant. His public image has been totally rehabbed, he's an American hero now. His bank account is doing just fine, it seems like the stage is set for this massive, triumphant return. But what came next was a whole different kind of battle.
And this is where another big myth comes from, that Colonel Parker killed the rocker and forced Elvis to sing all those soft ballads. But here's the crazy part. That's not what happened at all. See, Elvis always loved ballads and gospel music. That was his thing. It was actually Sam Phillips, way back at Sun Records, who pushed him to sing rock and roll. So coming out of the Army, he was actually going back to the music he wanted to make.
The problem was that musical taste led him straight into the Hollywood machine. He spent pretty much the entire 60s making movie after movie after movie. They made a ton of money, sure, but creatively, they were not great. They were formulaic, and his recording career basically ground to a halt. These are what fans call the wilderness years.
So by 1968, after almost a decade of making cheesy movies, people were starting to wonder, is the king finished? Is he just a movie star now? But Elvis had something else up his sleeve. It was time to remind everyone who he was. He's got a TV special coming up, and Colonel Parker wants this nice, safe Christmas show. And Elvis says, no, absolutely not. He pushes back hard. He wanted to get back to his roots, and he did. Dressed from head to toe in black leather, this wasn't just a concert, it was a statement, an act of pure artistic rebellion.
The critic Greil Marcus put it perfectly. He said, if ever there was music that bleeds, this was it. I mean, wow, this wasn't the sanitized movie star. This was the raw, dangerous, electric performer that the world first fell in love with. He put his entire legacy on the line that night, and it was an absolute, undeniable triumph.
So in the end, was John Lennon right? I don't think so. The Army didn't kill Elvis. In fact, you could argue it saved his career, turned him into an icon, and set the stage for one of the greatest comebacks ever. But the personal price he paid was huge. The seeds of everything that would haunt him later, the profound loss, the drug dependency, they were all planted during those 2 years. The Army made the king an American hero, for sure, but it also left scars on the man that never, ever really healed.